Thank you, Dave. That was beautiful. That's a wonderful way to start our service. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Unity Center DC Zoom Sunday service. And my name is Kathleen. I am the platform assistant today, and we are very fortunate we're having Jackie Woodside back in our group. And I'm looking forward. She's going to be talking about being the Christ. And as you already heard, Dave Kane is our musician and did a wonderful job of starting us off. And now for the centering prayer, I've taken a few lines from A Course in Miracles, from chapter 24, section 5, the Christ in You. And I want you to just take in these words. The Christ in you is very still. He looks on what he loves and knows it as himself. And thus does he rejoice at what he sees, because he knows that it is one with him and with his Father. Amen.
Thank you, David. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me back again today. It's nice to see so many of your familiar faces, and I've been here with you guys several times before, so thank you for having me back. I always enjoy this, that I can just kind of get up in the morning and hop on Zoom and go to church. That was really, that's always a blessing, so thank you for that. So it's lovely to see all of you again. My name, of course, is Jackie Woodside. I think most of you have heard me before. Yes. Ones I don't recognize are you fun people on the couches with the dogs. But yeah, hi there, guys. Looks like, yeah, a house party for church. I love that. It's just awesome. So I've been I've been studying the five unity principles lately, and I'm drawing my talk today from the second unity principle, which essentially says that you are the Christ, that your nature is one with divinity, and that you are the Christ. So that's what I want us to dive in today. The title of my talk is Being the Christ, or being the mind of God, if you will. And if I don't know about any of you, but that's a pretty daunting notion to me. The notion of being the Christ, the notion that it is our divine nature. If it's our divine nature, then why do I show up like I do sometimes in life with my ego and my opinions and my frustrations and my impatience? So I hope that you will enjoy diving into this topic with me. And I think in order to really dive into this topic of being the Christ, the first thing that we have to do is understand what the Christ means. I think a lot of people, particularly in mainstream Christianity, might think that Christ is Jesus's last name. And it's not. It's actually Jesus the Christ. So the Christ is a spiritual designation of one who has fully embodied one's divinity. So being the Christ means that you have fully come into your divine nature. It refers to the most divine consciousness that you can experience. Again, I said I've been studying this a bit lately, and I've been reading the book by Paramahasa Yogananda, mostly known as Yogananda. He wrote a book called The Second Coming of Christ, The Resurrection of the Christ Within You. It is a profound book. And in that book, he says that the Bible verse that's often quoted in spiritual circles, that John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son, so that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have life and have it to the full. And what Yogananda says about that verse and about the concept of the only begotten Son, or the Son of Man, is that it does not refer to the physical body of Jesus, but that it in fact refers to the fact that what God gave us is Christ consciousness, so that we may have life and have it to the fullest of our divine potential. And he explained that Christ consciousness is a state of divine awareness that Jesus fully embodied, but that is attainable by all of us. So a state of divine awareness of being the Christ. Again, while this is, a comforting notion to me, somewhat of a lofty notion, the challenge comes when we try to integrate that truth into how we think, how we feel, and of course, how we live our lives. I really believe that our journey as spiritual beings having a human experience is navigating and mastering this dance between our human and divine natures, being the Christ. So let's dive into this. How do we live in and embody being the Christ? Or you could also say knowing the mind of God. And when I think about that phrase, knowing the mind of God, of course, what immediately leaps to mind to me is a quote by Albert Einstein. Perhaps you've heard it before. Perhaps I've used it in a talk with you before. It's quoted that Einstein, on his deathbed, asked for a pen and pencil, and he scribbled out, "I want to know the mind of God. Everything else is just the details." I have studied and contemplated that quote for probably 2 decades now, and I feel like I could spend the rest of my life trying to wrap my head around it. I want to know the mind of God. Everything else is just the details. You know what that means, right? You realize that all the things that we worry about, that we fret about, just the details. Your kids, their well-being, your grandkids, your marriage, your finances, even your very longevity, your vitality, your life itself, just the details. World hunger, political unrest, climate change, 92 degrees before it even hits summer this coming week. Social oppression, inequality, just the details. Now, look, I'm not saying that those things are unimportant. Don't get me wrong, right? I'm not saying that you should not worry about those things, not be engaged in those things. No, that is part of our human expression. What is your role in all of these things that, as Einstein says, are just the details? So it simply means that they are secondary to knowing the mind of God and living the truth of your divinity. Live the truth of your divinity as you stand for social justice. Live the truth of your divinity as you stand for Mother Earth. Bring those two together and miraculous things happen. So this whole conundrum, if you will, of living your spiritual and physical and spiritual nature, your divine nature and your egoic nature, all at the same time. This conundrum reminds me of something that I read about a Nobel Prize winning astrophysicist who went by the name of Chandra because his name was Subramanian Chandrasekhar. I've tried, I've practiced. He went by the name Chandra, as he was known, one of the foremost 20th century astrophysicists who studied the structure of and evolution of stars and black holes. Some of the things that he came upon were understanding stellar structure, how stars become white dwarfs, stellar dynamics, quantum theory, hydromagnetic stability, and hydrodynamic stability. Why am I telling you this? Why am I telling you a story about an astrophysicist in my talk? Well, because after a physics conference about 10 years ago, he quipped to a group of onlookers who were with him, in order to do good physics, what is most needed is not to be very intelligent. Now, look, coming from the dude that came up with a mathematical theory of black holes, that sounded somewhat absurd. So I can just imagine people leaning in as he said, what is needed is not to be very intelligent. He followed that by saying, what matters most is to work very hard. And I was like, wow, I love that. So what he's saying is to develop yourself in any area. Don't rely on just your innate talent. Rely on your ability to focus on what matters. I would say that, quote, working hard gets a bad rap in spiritual circles sometimes. I shouldn't have to work hard. Everything should come in ease and grace. But how I understand that phrase, that you don't rely on your innate gifts of intelligence, you rely on, quote, working hard, is what I feel Chandra was pointing to there, is to what degree do you have a single-mindedness? To what degree do you remain steadfast in your pursuit? So when I think about and parallel this to our spiritual life, I draw a great deal of insight from this. So I want to ask you a couple of questions. To what degree do you long to know yourself as the Christ? How much does that occupy your every thought? To what degree do you desire to live beyond the kind of whims and proclivities of your ego? Is that your single focus? We were friends until I started asking these questions, weren't we? I know for myself, the answer to that is I could do a better job. I could do a better job. A few years ago, I went to a weekend retreat by the Indian guru named Sai Ma. And I remember one thing above all else that she said, because she said it with such depth and such passion. She said, I want God more than anything. I remember the passion through which she said that. And now going back to Chandra's quip about don't rely on your innate talent, rely on your ability for single-mindedness, single focus. And I want to ask you, do you want to know yourself as the divine more than anything? Is God your every thought? 1 Thessalonians 5:16 says, pray without ceasing. God is my every thought. How do you do that? It actually says, be joyful always, pray without ceasing, in all things give thanks to God. So how do you do that? You pray without ceasing when you go back to Chandra's point of having that single pointed focus, a commitment, a passion of knowing yourself as the Christ more than anything. I want to know the mind of God. Everything else is just the details. So I'm going to share with you some ideas that I have about how to do this. And I will say they are my ideas because I don't know that I know myself as God more than my ego, although it is my constant prayer. It is my constant passion. I walk my dog in the afternoons and with each step and looking at the trees and listening to the birds, I simply silently say to myself, God, God, this too is God. This too is God. And experience that divinity in everything around me. So I want to talk about three things. All of them are super, super simple, but not easy to practice in the world that we live in, where you are constantly pulled at for your time, your attention, your energy, your focus. What are all the things that are pulling at your focus? So you actually have to train yourself. You have to train your mind to be one with the mind of God. The first thing that I'm going to share with you is something that I just practiced for about the last 36 hours, and that is solitude. From Thursday after dinner until Saturday late morning, I spent 36-ish hours in absolute silence and solitude. Didn't interact with another human being. I didn't use technology. I never turned on my phone. I didn't get on my computer. I engaged in no media whatsoever. I spent a day, 36 hours, in the presence of just being with God. Now, I walked the dog and went for a walk in nature and cut down some trees that were hanging too low and I couldn't see my water view out front. And so I did things, but everything I did with the background of being the Christ, knowing myself as the Christ more fully. So to know yourself as the Christ, it does require pulling yourself away from the world. You know, this premise of being in solitude is so contrary to the way that our lives live. Our culture is awash in digital connection 24/7, but it's also starved for depth of meaning, starved for depth of connection. So how you cultivate that deeper meaning is to spend time alone and to spend time in spiritual practice. I want to borrow again a quote from the Yogananda book, and I actually want to read this to you and then go through it a bit. It's so rich and so delicious. So in the Yogananda book, The Second Coming of Christ, the Resurrection of the Christ Within You, he says, seclusion is the price of greatness and God contact. Now, going back to Chandra's quote that he said, about you don't have to be very intelligent, you have to work very hard. But you work very hard often by yourself. You know, people often will see me give a talk, or especially when I'm live and on stage, and people come up like, I want to do what you do. And I think, yeah, that's great. You have no idea. Because 90% of the time is spent behind the scenes, doing the work, doing the research, memorizing the script and planning, you know, the whole thing of running this kind of a business. And of course, people want the outside trappings. So the first line, seclusion is the price of greatness and God contact. Listen to this. This is so delicious. All who are willing to snatch time from the greedy material world and devote it instead to the divine search can learn to behold the wondrous factory of creation out of which all things are born. I'm going to come back to that sentence. Every soul can reascend by retreating to the wilderness of interior space and lifting the life force and consciousness from body identification to union with God. Isn't that delicious? I want to go back to that sentence. It's just so, so rich. All who are willing to snatch time away from the greedy material world. So first of all, snatch time away. It's not like the time is just going to present itself. Oh, here's a few free hours that I'm just going to devote to knowing myself as God more fully. It's not going to happen that way. Why? Because I love this. The greedy material world. The material world, the world of your senses, is greedy. It wants you, especially today. And you know what? We haven't even seen anything yet. Remember when we used to lament that TV was the problem? And then we lamented that the internet was the problem. And then we lamented that video games were the problem. Well, wait until AI really takes hold in our culture. Things are accelerating, and we have to be ready for that. So Yogananda says you have to snatch time from the greedy material world and do what? Devote it instead to the divine search. And whoever does that can learn, and then listen to this, can learn to behold the wondrous factory of creation out of which all things are born. The wondrous factory of creation. What does that mean? Manifestation. The factory of creation is your linking to divine mind, dropping in the seed of desire and creating your life that way. Just such a delightful, delightful quote. So, and in some of my courses, I have a course called Living in the Domain of Miracles. And every year when I teach that course, it's a 6-month-long study into living in the domain of miracles. One of my assignments is I tell people they have to spend 24 hours in silence. And you should see their faces on the Zoom screen. They're like, do you mean, wait, do you mean, no, do you mean I can't do, can I go to the store? Can I run errands? Can I? It's like, just be with yourself. So while they're initially very, very intimidated, they come back with having just had the most profound, profound experience. So Yogananda says to spend a day with yourself, to explore the interior wilderness of your soul, the interior wilderness. So one of the things that I do during my 24 hours, 36 hours for myself this year, this 6 months, what I did a lot yesterday is the second point that I want to bring you to, and it's a point that I've spoken on at your church before, because, and I speak on it frequently because it's one of those things that everybody knows they should do, and yet too far the greedy material world pulls us away. What am I talking about? You probably already have it in the back of your mind. I'm referring to meditation. I'm referring to having a meditation practice. You know, I first started my meditation practice right at my Unity Church, Unity on the River. It was during an Adventures in Faith. We were studying one of the Deepak Chopra books. I don't remember which one, but and probably similar to you. You know, this was 15 years ago that I started. 15, maybe 18 years ago that I started my meditation practice. And before that, I took a meditation class when I was right out of graduate school at the Cambridge Insight Center or something like that. And I'd heard all of the benefits and, health and spiritual benefits, emotional aspects of all of the things that meditation gives you. But I, just like you and probably many other people, said, I don't know, I just can't meditate. I can't quiet my mind. So I am here to remind you today, that's the point. That is meditation. Your ability to observe the fact that you cannot quiet your mind is your meditation practice. Regardless of, yes, Joan, you're pleased to hear that news, right? That is your meditation practice. It doesn't mean, oh gosh, I guess I'm not one of the lucky ones. I can't do it. No, it means you need to devote yourself then to the study of what is that wild mind of yours doing anyway. Yogananda calls it the interior wilderness. For myself, when I first started meditating, I had dealt with, and perhaps was still in at that time, a long history of chronic depression, chronic intermittent depression. So I kind of saw myself as somebody who was kind of a depressive, that my meditation and the busyness of my thoughts would kind of probably be in that lower realm of depressive thoughts. Well, who knew when I started my my meditation practice, what I saw was that what was underneath the depression was a lot of anxiety, a lot of self-judgment, a lot of worry thoughts. So if you, as you spend time in meditation, one of the benefits of it is that you actually get to see yourself. You get to explore that interior wilderness. And let me tell you a story that highlights one of the benefits for me of having this meditation practice that I've had now for 15 years. Right before the pandemic, I lived in DC for 3 years and was often flying back and forth between Boston and DC, where I live in Massachusetts and was living in DC at the time. And I was flying from Boston back to DC because that afternoon, I was teaching a leadership training workshop at Gallaudet University. And I was there early and, because It's just what I do. So I was wandering around the terminal a bit, and then I went to the area, the gate area, and was about to get ready to board. And as they called for boarding, I went to collect my things, and I reached for my work bag, and it wasn't there. And I was like, oh, gosh, what did I do with my work bag? Well, this was after I had engaged in my meditation practice and learned to use meditation to quiet my anxious mind. So I went to the gate and I said, hey, I know we're about to board, but I've misplaced my work bag. I'm going to leave the gate area and go retrace my steps. I went to the bathroom. I went to the ATM. I went to the bookstore. I want to make sure, like, I got to go find my work bag. So I was fairly calm as I was, retracing my steps, saying to myself, I know it's going to be here. It's going to be okay. Let it come to you. And, it's all going to work out. Retraced my steps, came back to the gate area. Nothing. Cannot find my bag. People are boarding. There's only a handful of people left. And they're looking at me like, you got to decide. You're going to get on the plane. You're going to stay. Should I stay until I find my bag? I knew it was in the terminal. I had it earlier. When I went to the ATM, I had it. When I went to the bookstore, I had it. So I knew it was here. I just couldn't find it. Well, just as the last person was boarding, I hear this voice, footsteps, boom, 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 coming down the terminal hallway. And I turned and looked, and one of the gate agents had slipped away because I said where I had gone. And he went and retraced my steps, and he's holding my bag. Is this it? It's like, yes, oh my goodness, where did you find it? And it was in a little behind something in the bookstore. I hadn't looked closely enough. And so I gave him a big hug, and he's standing there. Clearly, gate agents aren't supposed to hug their customers. I give him a big hug and I think, thank you so, so much. It was just awesome. And I grabbed my bag and I boarded the plane and I sat down, and immediately I wanted to meditate. I wanted to meditate. I wanted to go back into that still silent place that gave rise to the experience of knowing my good was about to unfold, even though all appearances said that probably not. All appearances looked like it was not going to go that way. Now, I have to tell you, that would have so not been my experience prior to taking on my meditation practice. I would have been, like many of you can imagine, kind of frantic and, oh my gosh, and what's going to happen and where did it go? How am I going to do my talk? My computer, my PowerPoint, everything was in there to do my talk in the afternoon. No, I walked through the terminal with kindness, with clarity, with grace, speaking the truth that my good was about to behold. And there it was. I love that story because it highlights what's possible for each and every one of us. Through that practice, I could experience Christ consciousness, calm, confident, present, and mostly knowing that all is well. So the third thing that I want to say to you is also a practice of mine that gets highlighted in that story. As I was walking around, rather than frantic inner dialogue, I asked for guidance. And I asked for guidance in a particular way through affirming my higher good. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, in all things give thanks. How do you live that way? Well, when life throws you a curveball and the bag is nowhere to be found, pray without ceasing. Rejoice always, give thanks in all things. So I walked around, and my inner dialogue truly was, this is going to work out for a higher good. I know that my higher good is at play here. I know it's here. I know I'll have it before I leave. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I want to encourage all of you, if you're not already, sometimes we get confused about what kind of prayer to engage in, but ask for guidance. One of my favorite spiritual practices, I teach this in one of my programs, is writing letters to God. Many of you have probably read Neil Donald Walsh, Conversations with God series. He's not the only one that can do that. Have your own conversations with God in your journal with your handwriting. I do it all the time. My journal is filled with these dialogues that I have with my higher self, with the divine. And it is astounding to me. Sometimes I go back and read it and damn, that's good. I'm not that smart. Where did that come from? It comes from quieting the ego mind and being the mind of God. We can all do this every single day. So to truly embody the mind of God, living from your Christ nature, being the Christ. It requires snatching time from the greedy material world. Are you willing to do that? It requires having a profound commitment to knowing yourself as the Christ above all else. Are you willing to do that? Because through these practices of solitude, meditation, asking for guidance, and probably a million others as well, you can, and we're here to transcend your human limitations and be an expression of the Christ in this world. And you know, when you do that, here's what happens. You come to know a profound love that surpasses all understanding. When you spend time in the solitude, snatching yourself from the greedy material world, when you meditate and pray, you develop this love for life, a love for your fellow journeyers, those people that used to annoy you and piss you off. You now just, I behold the Christ in you, even when I can't stand the rest of you. Right? You have a love for each and every moment, even when things look like they're not going your way. You have a love for yourself. My son at night, when we say a blessing at dinner time, he says, you know, I thank you, God, for this food, for mommy, for mama, for Zozo, our dog, and thank you, God, for me. I love myself. Done that since he was a little boy. And most profoundly, when you practice these principles, you develop a deep and abiding love for God. So it really is the ultimate spiritual attainment. It's why we're here, and it's available so long as you're willing to make that single pointed dedication and commitment. May we all have the wisdom and the dedication to be the Christ and be the mind of God. Let's take a few minutes now and bring these thoughts into some time of meditation. If you'd like to join me for this meditation, I invite you to just kind of center yourself in your body right now. Feel the earth underneath you, the chair that's supporting you. And let's begin this meditation as we began life itself, and that is simply with a breath. Take a deep cleansing breath and imagine it going in through your heart chakra, up to the third eye, and out through the heart chakra. Again, a deep breath in through the heart chakra, up to the third eye, and release out to the heart chakra. You continue with that breathing just for a few more breaths on your own, in through the heart chakra, up to the third eye, and release. In this moment of divine surrender, in this moment of silence, snatching time away from the greedy material world to be in your inner chamber, the beauty of your interior wilderness for us to explore. I want you in this time to practice the principles that we've just talked about by going into your inner world through solitude, connecting with your higher self through meditation, and then thirdly, dropping a prayer, a request for guidance into the sea of nothingness from which all things came. So I know that there's an area of your life right now that's perhaps working you in a particular way. Maybe it's a care, a concern, something that's weighing on you, something that you're feeling worried about. I just invite you to call to mind just one area. I want us to practice asking for guidance in the silence of meditation and knowing that our goodness is always being made manifest and the answers are always presented to us. So call to mind this area of your life that perhaps you've felt some concern about or is weighing on you a bit more than any other area. Call that to mind. And imagine now just the sea of nothingness out in front of you, the energy of God, creation, the beautiful fountain of creation that life is. I invite you to just drop a question into this open sea, a question for guidance. How shall I be in the face of this? What's my highest path? What wisdom do I need to see or know? And in the moments of silence that follow you dropping that question, I invite you to just open your inner ears, open your inner eyes for the divine guidance that you are and that God is. So let's take this now into a few moments of inquiry, of supplication, asking for guidance, and a few moments in the silence. And say thank you, God, for the guidance that's been given in this moment, in this beautiful place. May we remember who we really are, the Christ incarnate as you, as me, as each and every one of us. And so it is.
And now for our closing prayer. I have picked a poem from Rumi, and this is translated by Jonathan Starr. There is a force within that gives you life. Seek that. In your body, there lies a priceless jewel. Seek that. O wandering Sufi, if you are in search of the greatest treasure, don't look outside. Look within. Seek that. Amen.
Start where you are, and where we all begin and end up back at is a very busy mind. The more our culture is inundated, you're overstimulated. We don't realize the degree to which we're overstimulated, which is why I can't recommend enough doing a day of silence where you just cut yourselves off from all stimulation, technological in particular, to really look at the degree to which you have become addicted to being stimulated. Yeah. And the more that you're able to have that be kind of a regular practice and have God be your every thought. I just want to say a little bit more about this and that pull that you're feeling. And I know many of you are also feeling that. And I want to just presence that in the place of kind of where we are with the evolution of consciousness and conscious evolution. We are at a time that there's almost like a slingshot with like the pulling back, going back to draconian laws and losing rights and the climate is a mess and there's just so much going on that the evolution is going back. Like devolution is happening, being pulled back like in a slingshot. But what happens when you release?
Right.
And I don't know when that release is going to come, but we are going to be rocketed into a new era of consciousness. And that's what we are the front runners of. My mission is I'm a torchbearer for a vision of a world transformed. We're all holding that torch, will be holding that torch. Right now, people look at us sideways like, oh, what's wrong with them? Or, there's this kind of backward movement of conservatism that's infiltrating our world in very real ways. So there's this kind of darkness and light. And it's so important during this time that each and every one of us ground ourselves deeply in truth principle, because I don't think we've seen the end of this storm yet. I think there's going to be more pulling back, and we need to be the spiritual front runners for this next phase of evolution so that that release can happen and that forward movement back to unity and oneness can occur. So I love, Sandy, that you said that you feel. I felt that when I delivered this message, when I wrote this talk, and I was studying, and still am studying Yogananda's book, The Second Coming of Christ, The Resurrection of the Christ Within You. It's like such a profound message. I felt that also, and the message feels a little heavy, but I don't think heavy in a bad way, more heavy in its importance. The resurrection of the Christ nature within each and every one of us. That is the second coming of Christ, and that's what we are preparing for.
We are so blessed here at Unity Center DC for extraordinary speakers, talented musicians who share with us each week their God gift, their message, their inspiration. And for us as recipients, I'd like you to take this moment and be grateful. If you want to express your gratitude by giving a gift to Unity Center DC, it's possible. We'll put up on the screen the options, but you can give online, you can mail a cash or a check to the address you'll see on the screen, so that we can continue this ministry, which has blessed us all. Thank you.